When the bride pointed me toward the trash bins, I finally understood my place in their perfect little love story. I'm Evan, 32, and if you'd asked me last year how I felt about my younger brother getting married, I'd have said I was happy for him. Genuinely. Jeremy and I weren't close, never had been, but we coexisted peacefully. We were those siblings who shared a roof growing up, but not much else. He was loud, brash, constantly surrounded by friends or drama. I was quiet, a bit reserved, always more comfortable listening than talking. Still, I always showed up for him when it mattered. Birthdays, college move-in, even those messy breakups where he'd call me slurring his words at 3 a.m. I'd answer. I'd come. I always came. So when the wedding invitation arrived, I RSVP'd yes without a second thought. It felt like a given. I was his only brother, after all. I should have noticed the signs. The invite said, Evan plus guest. But there was no call, no message, no, hey man, can't wait to see you there. When I texted him to ask what the dress code was, just a casual question, he replied 2 days later with a thumbs up emoji. That was it. No see you soon, no details. I chalked it up to stress. Weddings are chaos. Maybe he was overwhelmed. That's what I told myself, because the alternative, that he didn't care if I came or not, wasn't something I was ready to consider. The day of the wedding was bright and hot, the kind of late summer afternoon where everything feels loud. I drove 2 hours to the venue, a fancy vineyard I'd never heard of but immediately realized was the kind of place that cost a small fortune just to breathe on. Rows of white chairs faced a flower-drenched altar, and everything smelled like fresh roses and money. I'd brought a gift, an envelope with a generous check, more than I probably should have given, but again, it felt like a given. Jeremy was family. You show up, you support, you give. I walked up to the welcome table and smiled at the girl behind the clipboard. She scanned the list, frowned slightly, then scribbled something on a post-it before glancing up. Just you, right? I nodded, a little thrown off by her tone. Yeah, Evan. She pointed vaguely toward the far side of the seating area. We're pretty full, but there's some standing room by the hedge. She said it like she was offering me a privilege. I blinked. There's no seat for me? She shrugged. Sorry. Bride's side did some last-minute adjustments. Last-minute adjustments. Like I was luggage that didn't make it onto the plane. I stood there for a second, dumbfounded. I scanned the rows. I saw cousins. Old high school friends. A guy Jeremy used to play Call of Duty with in college. Even the hairstylist was there, fanning herself and chatting with someone who looked like the officiant. But no seat for me. I swallowed it. I told myself not to make a scene. It was his day, not mine. I started walking toward the hedge when I heard her voice, sharp, nasal, a little too theatrical. Oh, you can stand by the trash, she said, pointing behind her without looking at me. We're out of seats. It was Paige, the bride. We'd met 3 times. Once over lunch, once at a family barbecue, and once when I helped Jeremy move apartments and she barely acknowledged me. Each interaction left me with the same impression. Paige was pretty, polished, and profoundly uninterested in anyone who couldn't serve a function in her social climbing. At first, I thought she was joking, but when I laughed, her face didn't change. I mean, seriously, she added, waving a hand like she was dismissing a waiter. There's a spot near the bins. You'll be fine. I looked around. People were watching. Some awkwardly looked away. No one spoke up, not even Jeremy. I saw him a few feet away, adjusting his tie and talking to one of Paige's uncles. He glanced at me, gave a tight smile, and then went right back to his conversation. Like this was normal. Like it was okay. Like I wasn't the guy who helped him pay off a credit card bill last year when Paige's ring accidentally went on his emergency fund. And that's when something clicked. Not anger. Not even sadness. Just clarity. I looked at the gift in my hand, an envelope with a 4-digit check and a handwritten note wishing them happiness, and I realized exactly what I was to them. A wallet. A placeholder. Background noise. I turned to Paige and smiled. Fitting, I said, nodding toward the bins. Since that's where this marriage belongs. I don't remember if she said anything back. Maybe she gasped. Maybe she didn't. I just turned around, walked toward the parking lot, and felt the weight of something lift off my shoulders. That's when I heard footsteps behind me, fast, uneven. Evan, wait. Jeremy. I kept walking. And just as I reached the car door, he caught up. Seriously? You're gonna make a scene, he said, out of breath and red in the face. This is my wedding, dude. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I realized I didn't recognize him anymore. I didn't say a word. He stood there, breathing hard, like I had just punched him in the gut. Like he was the one who'd just been shoved aside like last week's recycling. "Look," he said, glancing nervously back toward the venue. "You're being dramatic. Paige didn't mean anything by it." I raised an eyebrow. "She told me to stand by the trash, Jeremy." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Okay, yeah, that was not great. But it's her big day. She's stressed. You know how she gets when things don't go exactly right. That right there? That little line? It hit me harder than I expected. You know how she gets." Like he'd rehearsed this excuse before. Like there had been other moments, maybe smaller ones, maybe worse, and he'd brushed them off with the same sentence. He wasn't defending me. He was managing me. Like I was another potential PR disaster on his carefully curated wedding day. I opened the car door, slipped the envelope back into my pocket, and took one long breath. You didn't even notice I didn't have a seat. Jeremy's mouth opened. Closed. "I thought you'd find one." I laughed once. "Cold. Even the DJ's assistant got a seat, man. Your fiancé's lash technician got one. But not your brother." He looked away. His silence was all the confirmation I needed. "She said she wanted a small ceremony," he muttered. "But not too small for 20 of her friends I've never met?" I said. "Let's be honest, this wasn't an accident. This was calculated." He didn't deny it. And honestly, that hurt more than if he had. I shook my head and climbed into the car. I didn't slam the door. I didn't peel out. I just sat for a moment, letting the AC hum around me while I watched him standing there, still trying to decide if it was worth defending his bride or salvaging the last thread of decency left between us. Then he knocked. I rolled down the window halfway. "Look," he said, lowering his voice. "I'm sorry, all right? Paige, she's particular. And maybe she felt like you didn't support our relationship or—" I never said a word against her. I cut in. "That's the problem," he snapped. "You're always so quiet. So distant. You act like you're better than everyone." And there it was. Not just Paige. Not just a missing chair. This had been simmering for years, bubbling beneath every polite interaction and forced smile. I narrowed my eyes. "You think this is about me being quiet? Or is it about you needing people who clap loud enough to hear over your own doubts?" Jeremy took a step back like I'd slapped him. "Well, yeah," I said, gripping the wheel. "Well." I pulled out slowly, leaving him standing in the gravel like a man who wasn't sure whether he'd lost something or dodged a bullet. And I didn't look back. Not when I passed the rows of parked cars. Not when I saw Paige standing near the vineyard's entrance, lips tight, eyes narrowed, one hand on her hip like she'd already spun the narrative in her favor. But I did hear the faint ping of my phone as I drove away. Paige texted, "Disrespectful and immature. I hope you're proud of yourself." Mom texted, "Jeremy's crying. You couldn't have just kept the peace for one day?" And Cheryl texted, "We all have to make sacrifices for love, Evan. Grow up." I muted the thread. I wasn't interested in playing damage control. Not this time. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, gift envelope in hand, wondering how many times I'd let myself be sidelined in the name of family unity. And what exactly that word, family, was supposed to mean when it only ran in one direction. I didn't want revenge. At least, not at first. But then I remembered something Jeremy probably forgot in all his wedding chaos. The condo. A one-bedroom they'd been renovating on weekends. The starter home Paige kept bragging about online. Jeremy didn't qualify for the mortgage on his own. His credit was a mess. But mine? Mine was clean. Solid. Dependable. So I'd co-signed 6 months ago. They needed me to close the deal. I never took my name off the deed. And that's when the idea began to take shape. Slow, deliberate, and cold. Because if I was just trash to them, then maybe it was time they learned what it felt like to lose something they thought they didn't need. I took one last sip of wine, opened my laptop, and pulled up the documents. And I smiled. That condo? It had a lot of value. The thing about being the quiet one in the family is that people forget you're watching. They mistake silence for passivity, like you're just floating through life without thoughts of your own. But quiet doesn't mean weak. It means I pick my battles. And this one? This was long overdue. The next morning, I took the day off work. Not because I was upset. Not anymore. That emotion had passed. What I felt now was purpose. Calm, clear, and steady. I brewed my coffee, clicked open the folder on my desktop marked property docs, and scrolled until I found what I needed, the co-ownership agreement for the condo Jeremy and Paige were remodeling. Back when Jeremy called me in a panic about losing their dream unit, when they needed just one more adult with clean credit to qualify for the mortgage, I was that guy. No hesitation. I'd been assured it was just on paper, that they'd take care of the payments, and once they refinanced in 6 months, my name would be removed. Well, it had been 7 months now, and I was still on the deed. I'd checked. Twice. To them, it was a formality. A signature from the dependable older brother. Something they could toss aside once the real adults took over. To me, it was leverage. At 11:03 a.m., I called the real estate attorney I'd worked with when I bought my own place. Nice guy. Discreet. Thorough. I explained the situation, asked what my options were, and waited. You're listed as a co-owner, Evan, he confirmed. That gives you considerable rights over the property. If you wanted to force a sale or reclaim occupancy, you could. Even if I haven't been living there? I asked. Doesn't matter, he replied. Ownership is ownership. That was all I needed. I thanked him, hung up, and started drafting a letter. Not a legal notice, yet, but something polite. Formal. The kind of letter that makes your stomach drop by paragraph 3. I titled it, Notice of Intent to Assume Full Occupancy. Then I paused, because I wanted this to land with precision. Not fury, not drama, just inevitability. I wanted Paige to read it with her morning latte and feel the same sharp flicker of humiliation I felt standing by those trash bins in a press suit with no seat and no voice. Around 3 p.m., I printed the letter, slid it into a clean envelope, and drove it to the condo. I didn't knock. They weren't home. Probably still recovering from the post-wedding festivities, tasting cakes, reviewing drone footage, pretending their seating chart hadn't turned a brother into a punchline. I slid the envelope through the mail slot. On the way back to my car, I took one last look at the condo. It really was a nice place. Mid-century exterior, plenty of light. I'd helped paint those walls, carried in that hideous couch Paige insisted on. She said it was boho chic. Jeremy didn't even know what that meant. I got in my car and drove away, feeling lighter than I had in months. 3 hours later, my phone buzzed. Jeremy texted, "What is this letter? Are you serious?" I didn't respond. A minute later, Jeremy texted, "You can't do this, man. Paige is freaking out. We just got married. This is the worst possible timing." I finally replied, "You should have thought of that before telling me to stand by the trash." Read. No reply. I imagined them in the living room, Paige waving the letter like it was radioactive, Jeremy pacing, mumbling, checking the internet for how to remove a co-owner from a deed. Probably Googling my name, wondering if I really meant it, if I'd go through with it. I smiled, because I did, and I would. The next day, the real fun began. First came the email from Paige, long, rambling, laced with faux empathy and passive aggression. "Dear Evan, we're sorry for how things played out at the wedding. Emotions were high. I'd hoped we could start fresh as a family, but your recent actions have made that difficult. I'm not sure why you feel the need to escalate things, but Jeremy and I would appreciate a conversation to clarify everyone's intentions before lawyers get involved. Let's be adults about this." Paige. I didn't respond. The following week, I filed the initial paperwork to force a sale of the condo. My lawyer sent them the notification with my signature neatly printed at the bottom. Jeremy called that night. His voice was strained. No pretense. "You're really doing this?" he asked. "Yes." He was quiet for a beat. "Do you need the money or something?" That made me laugh. "No. I need the respect I've never gotten from you or your wife. I figure this is the closest I'll get. You're punishing me for one stupid seating mistake?" "No," I said. "I'm reminding you that I'm not disposable." He tried to argue, tried to guilt, even pulled the "but we're family" card. That one always came out when consequences hit. "You made a choice, Jeremy," I said quietly. "Now I'm making mine." And with that, I hung up. I wasn't expecting what came next. 3 days later, my mom showed up. At my door. Tired eyes. Tight lips. Holding a plastic container of lasagna like it could erase a decade of favoritism and neglect. "We need to talk," she said. No hello. No apology. Just, "We need to talk." I let her in. She sat stiffly on the edge of my couch, lasagna untouched in her lap. "I heard you're trying to take the condo," she said, as if I'd stolen candy from a child. "I own the condo, Mom. Half of it." She didn't blink. "You know how much this means to Jeremy and Paige. Why are you doing this?" That word again. Doing. Like I'd flipped the world upside down, not just stopped enabling it. "Because you all taught me something," I said slowly. "That being quiet gets you nothing but a view from the trash pile. So I'm trying something new." Mom pursed her lips. She was under stress. Weddings are complicated. So is being treated like an afterthought by your own blood. She didn't argue with that. She just stood, placed the lasagna on the counter, and said, I hope this is worth it. I walked her to the door. It already is, I said, and closed it gently behind her. I returned to the table, picked up my coffee, and watched the inbox light up again. Lawyers, mortgage officers, and, somewhere in between, Jeremy trying to find a compromise. But there wouldn't be one, because I wasn't done, and what I had planned next. That was the part they'd never see coming. The final email from their lawyer came in 2 weeks later, polished, direct, and with a faint air of desperation beneath the legalese. Our clients, Mr. Jeremy Carter and Mrs. Paige Carter, request that Mr. Evan Carter reconsider the forced sale and allow a voluntary buyout of his share. They are prepared to offer a lump sum of $15,000 as compensation in exchange for relinquishing any ownership or legal claim to the property in question. 15,000. I laughed out loud. Not because of the number, though. Yes, it was insultingly low, but because it was the perfect final act of arrogance wrapped in fake generosity. That condo was easily worth $500,000. The down payment alone had been 70. And now they wanted me to walk away for the price of a used car? Nope. I typed out a quick reply, CC'd my lawyer, and kept it simple. Offer declined. See you in mediation. Because I wasn't bluffing. I hadn't been bluffing from the moment I slid that envelope through their door. And for once in my life, I didn't care if it made me look bitter or petty. The truth was, I was bitter. But not over one wedding slight. It was years of being treated like a safety net, only unrolled when they needed something, then shoved back into the closet when they didn't. This was bigger than trash bins and seating charts. This was about every time I sat in silence so someone else could speak over me. The mediation happened a month later. A sleek office downtown, neutral walls, bad coffee. They both showed up looking tired. Paige didn't meet my eyes. Jeremy gave me a tight nod, the kind you give a stranger who might have once been important. The mediator, a kind-eyed woman in her 50s, started things off cordially. We're here to determine the most amicable path forward. Evan, since you initiated the action, would you like to start? I did. I passed her a copy of my proposal already prepared, already signed. I wasn't just selling my half of the condo. I was buying theirs. Silence. Paige's head snapped up. Excuse me. Jeremy leaned forward. You're offering to buy us out? I nodded. Full market value. I've had it appraised. I'll handle closing costs and all legal fees. You walk away with a clean check and no lien on your future. The mediator blinked in surprise. That's extremely generous. It was. And it wasn't about being generous. It was about being done. Jeremy leaned back, visibly thrown. Paige's eyes narrowed. This is some power play. You just want to evict us. No, I said calmly. I want to own what I already helped build. You can stay until the end of the month. 30 days. That's more grace than I got. They didn't respond. Just whispered to each other, lips tight, hands clenched. The mediator gave them time. After 10 minutes of hushed arguing and one dramatic sigh from Paige, Jeremy finally said, We accept. And just like that, it was done. For weeks later, I had the keys. They were gone. No note. No goodbye. Just silence. The place was cleaner than I expected. A few leftover decorations still hung in the hallway, framed photos of their engagement shoot, all smiles and sunlight. I boxed them up, carefully, and left them at their new address, return label and all. I stood in the empty living room for a while, just breathing. The walls still held the faint scent of fresh paint. The same paint I'd helped roll on during that first renovation weekend, when Jeremy was excited and Paige pretended not to hate getting her hands dirty. I could still hear her complaints echoing in my head. This color looks cheap. Can we afford something more modern? I smiled. And then I opened the windows. Let the air sweep through. 2 weeks after the final papers cleared, I listed the condo for sale. I didn't want it. I never wanted it. What I wanted was control, respect, closure. And I got all three. The condo sold above asking. I made back my share and then some. More than the money, though, was the peace. I didn't hear from Jeremy again. Not directly, but I saw the posts. Passive-aggressive Instagram stories about fake family, and some people never grow up. Paige went on a podcast ranting about how jealous siblings ruin marriages. I didn't respond. I didn't comment. I just watched, sipped my coffee, and smiled. My mom texted once. Just one line. I hope you're proud of what you did. I didn't reply. But if I had, I would have said, I am. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't just show up. I didn't just take it. I chose me. A few months later, I moved into a new place, my own, paid for in full with the profit from the sale. No shared deeds, no cosigns, no Paige, no Jeremy. Just sunlight, quiet, and space that was entirely mine. I put up one framed photo in the living room. Not of family, not of weddings. Just a landscape shot I took on a solo trip the week after everything ended, a mountain road in the distance, empty and open, winding towards something better. Every time I pass it, I remember that moment by the trash bins. And I smile. Because that was the day I stopped standing in the background and started building something for myself.